Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're taking a look at a real head-turner, a car that kind of broke the mold, the Porsche 928S.
It's a fascinating one.
It really is, and we've got a ton of stuff to dig into, articles, specs, historical stuff. We've got our own little Porsche museum here.
I think what's really interesting about the 928 is it's a real turning point for Porsche and maybe for cars in general.
Yeah, totally. It wasn't just building a new car. It was like a whole new way of thinking about cars. And you know what? This was the only TLI sports car ever to win European Car of the Year.
Wow.
That tells you something, right?
It does. It's quite an accomplishment.
So our mission today is to get under the skin of this thing. What made the 928S so special, both back in the day, A and D? You know, as a classic car today, it's not just a pretty face. There's a lot more to it.
It's got a rich history.
Totally. So let's rewind the clock a bit, back to the late 60s, early 70s. Porsche was at a crossroads. The 911, you know, their iconic rear-engine sports car, was facing some, let's say, uncertainty. And the Grand Touring market was booming. People wanted these luxurious, powerful cars built for cruising.
They needed a new flagship.
Right.
Something to show off their engineering and to attract a different type of buyer.
Exactly. And that's where Ernst Fuhrmann comes in. He was the head honcho at Porsche, and he had this vision, this really radical vision, for a front-engine V8-powered Grand Tourer.
Something to go up against the big names like Mercedes and BMW.
But with that Porsche DNA, of course.
Exactly. He wanted to be luxurious, but also sporty, comfortable for long drives, but also exciting to drive a proper Grand Tour.
And that's where the Landshark was born. You know, some people call it that because of its sleek, almost predatory look.
It's a fitting nickname.
Yeah, for sure. But here's the thing. A lot of people thought the 928 was meant to replace the 911.
Ah, the old replacement myth.
But that's not true at all.
Nope. Porsche always intended for them to exist alongside each other. They were for different kinds of drivers. The 911 was the pure sports car, and the 928 was for a more refined Grand Touring experience. It was more about expanding their options, not getting rid of their heritage.
Right. So in 1977, the 928 makes its big debut. It was like nothing Porsche had ever done before. It was sleek. It looked futuristic. It had this powerful V8 engine. It was a bold move, and you know what? It was a smash hit. Critics loved it, people were intrigued, and boom, it wins European Car of the Year.
And as you said, no other sports car has done that since. That says a lot about how impactful the 928 was.
For sure. It showed that Porsche was willing to innovate to challenge the norm. But for our deep dive today, we're focusing on a specific version of this groundbreaking car, the 928S.
Ah, yes, the 928S. This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
This one came out in 1980, and it wasn't just a simple upgrade. It was a major step forward in performance style and those iconic design features that make it so desirable today.
Like those slotted flat disc wheels.
Exactly. They're instantly recognizable.
Yeah, they scream 928S. And they're not just about looks either. They were engineered to help cool the brakes, which was crucial for a car this powerful.
It's those little details that set the 928S apart. Porsche wasn't just slapping on bigger engines. They were constantly refining every part of the car, both the things you see and the things you don't. And that dedication to engineering excellence is clear in all the little changes and improvements they made over the years.
So if you're thinking about getting into the 928 game, those little details, they matter. Different model years will have different gearboxes, different torque tubes, even different brakes.
Absolutely. So you got to do your homework and understand those differences before you jump in.
Now, you know how we mentioned the S wasn't available in North America right away? Well, this is where the competition group package comes in. It's a cool little side story in the 928S saga, and it might make you feel like a Porsche detective if you ever go looking for one.
I can see that.
Imagine you're a North American buyer back then. You're seeing these European S specs, and you're like, I want that. So Porsche offered this package that basically gave you the S look ahead of time. Front and rear spoilers, those 16-inch flat disc wheels, sport seats, a beefed-up suspension. It was as close as you could get to the real deal.
That's pretty cool.
And get this, buyers could even pick their own paint colors and interior colors.
Wow, so it was like a custom order almost?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was Porsche's way of catering to those diehard enthusiasts who wanted that extra something special.
I could see why they did that.
But here's the catch. Finding a true original competition group car today is like finding a needle in a haystack. So many of them have been modified or had parts swapped over the years that it's almost impossible to know for sure without really digging into those option codes.
Wow, so the originals are super rare.
Oh yeah, they're like unicorns. And that makes them really desirable for collectors.
Right.
It shows the lasting appeal of that 928S look.
Definitely. So we've got the origin story, The performance upgrades this rare competition group package. It's clear this is more than just a car, right?
Oh, yeah, it's a whole philosophy. But the 928S story, this is just the beginning. We're just getting started. Next time, we'll dive into how this amazing machine evolved over time, how it adapted to the changing world, and how it pushed the limits of performance and luxury. Buckle up, because it's gonna be a wild ride. All right, so we've established the 928S was a real game changer. It was like a rebel in the Porsche world. But now let's pop the hood and see what made this land shark tick.
Now, this is where it gets really exciting. The heart of the 928S was Porsche's first ever production V8 engine, the M28. At its core, it was a 4.5-liter all-aluminum water-cooled beast.
Wait a sec, water-cooled. I thought Porsche was all about those air-cooled engines like in the 911. This was a big change for them, right?
Oh yeah, a huge change. It showed just how serious they were about creating something totally new with the 928. And the M28 was a marvel of engineering. Single overhead camshafts, 2 valves per cylinder in its initial form.
Okay, so pretty standard stuff for a V8.
Well, not quite. See, Porsche designed the M28 with a pretty low compression ratio. Why? Because they knew this engine had massive potential for power upgrades down the line. They were thinking ahead.
So they basically built in the ability to crank up the power later on.
Exactly. And that's exactly what they did with the 928S. They increased the displacement to 4.7 liters, bunk up that compression ratio, and bam, more horsepower, more torque, more of that glorious V8 sound.
Okay, but it wasn't all about raw power, right? There had to be more to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The M28 was incredibly advanced for its time. Porsche fitted it with Bosch Cagetronic fuel injection, which was state-of-the-art back then. It made sure the engine was getting the perfect amount of fuel for both power and efficiency.
So they were thinking about both performance and practicality. That's not something you always see in high-performance sports cars.
You're right about that. But the 928S was all about challenging expectations. And remember that transaxle design we talked about? That was another innovation that made the 928S stand out.
You know, I'm still not 100% clear on what a transaxle actually is. Could you break it down for me?
Sure. In most cars, the engine's in the front and the transmission's bolted right to it somewhere in the middle. But with a transaxle, the transmission's moved all the way to the BPEA right by the rear axle. It's like they're separated but still working together.
Interesting. So why go to all that trouble?
Balance. It gives you near-perfect 50-50 weight distribution between the front and rear axles. This makes the car super stable and predictable, especially when you're pushing it hard through corners.
I'm starting to get why the 928S handles so well. It's all about balance.
Exactly. But there's one more piece to this puzzle we need to talk about, the Weissach axle. This is a good one.
The Weissach axle. It sounds almost mythical. Tell me more.
It's named after the town where Porsche's Research and Development Center is located. But it's not just a fancy name. The Weissach axle was revolutionary. It was an early form of passive rear-wheel steering. Now, don't think it's like the active systems in modern cars. It's different.
So the rear wheels could actually turn.
Yes. But it was passive, meaning it reacted to the car's movements, not the driver's input. Through some clever suspension geometry and these things called elastic kinematics, the rear wheels would subtly toe in when you went around a corner. Imagine the rear wheels turning slightly in the same direction as the front wheels as you go into a bend.
Wow, that's amazing. And what did that do for the driving experience?
Stability. Especially at high speeds. Imagine you're taking a fast corner. In most cars, the rear end might feel like it wants to slide out, get a bit loose. But with the Weissach axle, that tendency is reduced. The car feels more planted, more in control. It gives you the confidence to push harder.
It's mind-blowing that they were doing this back in the 80s. It's like they were engineering for a level of performance that was beyond what drivers could even handle at the time.
Porsche was always pushing the boundaries. But they weren't content to just create a masterpiece and leave it at that. They were always refining, tweaking, improving. Throughout the 928S's production run, they made a bunch of important changes, all aimed at making the car even better.
Like those little production quirks we talked about.
Exactly. Let's look at some of the key model years, and you'll see how Porsche's obsession with detail really comes through. Starting with 1980, the year the 928S debuted, Porsche actually modified the gearbox on all the manual transmission cars. They shortened the torque tube, that link between the engine and transmission, and they used a different rear subframe.
Okay, so we're talking about some pretty big changes here. Why go to all that effort?
Because it made a real difference. These changes improved the car's handling and responsiveness. It made it feel even more connected to the driver. It wasn't about reinventing the wheel, it was about making it perfect.
And then in 1982, they added a vibration damper to the torque tube bearing. I'm guessing that wasn't just for comfort.
You got it. While it did make the ride smoother, it also helped the drivetrain last longer. Remember, this was a high-performance car, and Porsche was thinking about the long haul. They wanted these cars to be enjoyed for years, not just for a quick thrill.
So they were engineering for both the heart A&D, the head, performance A&D practicality.
Exactly. And then in 1983, they made a big move for the North American market. They introduced the 4-speed automatic transmission as an option. Remember, up until then, the S only came with a manual gearbox.
So this was about giving buyers more choice, adapting to what different markets wanted.
Exactly. And it was a smart move. The automatic opened up the 928S to a whole new group of drivers. Some people just prefer that effortless cruising experience, and Porsche understood that.
It probably helped them sell more cars, too, especially in North America, where automatics were becoming really popular.
For sure. And then in 1985, North America got another treat, the 5.0-liter 32-valve engine. This was huge. More power, more torque, more of everything that made the 928S so special.
But Europe was still running a different engine spec at that time. It's those little quirks that make the 928S so interesting for enthusiasts.
It's true. They make each model year unique, a snapshot of Porsche's constant evolution and how they responded to different markets. And finally, in 1986, the last year of the 928S, Porsche gave it one last hurrah with some serious suspension and brake upgrades.
These weren't just little tweaks, right? We're talking major improvements.
Yeah, you could say that. These upgrades were so extensive that they were basically a preview of the upcoming S4 model. If you want the ultimate 928S, a late production 1986 is the one to get.
So it's like the culmination of all their refinements, the best of the 928S before they moved on to the next chapter. But there's more to the 928S story than just engines and transmissions and suspension magic. We need to talk about the design.
Ah, yes, the design. The 928S's styling was, shall we say, controversial when it first came out. It was like nothing else on the road, a futuristic spaceship compared to the cars of its time.
Some people loved it, some people hated it. Those rounded curves, the sloping roofline, the pop-up headlights. It was a bold statement, and it was a big car, wasn't it? Much bigger than the 911.
It was designed to be a grand tourer, remember? Comfort and practicality were just as important as performance. It had to be roomy enough for long trips with plenty of space for luggage. The 928S was a real 2+2, meaning it had usable rear seats, not like some so-called sports cars.
But even though it was big, it was also surprisingly aerodynamic, right?
Incredibly so. Porsche was obsessed with aerodynamics, and it shows in the 928S's low drag coefficient. Everything from those integrated bumpers to the smooth bodywork to that sloping roofline was designed to cut through the air. It was a car that sliced through the wind, which not only helped its performance, but also its fuel economy.
Which is something we often forget about with these classic performance cars. They weren't all gas guzzlers. Porsche was thinking about efficiency even back then.
They were ahead of their time in a lot of ways. But let's step inside the 928S for a minute, because the interior was just as impressive as the exterior. A perfect blend of luxury, sportiness, and innovation.
Those seats, they were like something out of a spaceship. So comfy and supportive. I've heard they were designed with help from NASA engineers. Maybe it's just a rumor, but it adds to the legend.
And remember, this was the first car to have an instrument binnacle that moved with the steering wheel. No matter how you adjusted the wheel, the gauges were always right in front of you. It seems like a simple thing, but it was a big deal back then.
It's standard in most cars today. But the 928S was the pioneer. And it shows Porsche's focus on the driver, on making everything about enhancing that connection between the person and the machine.
Exactly. But let's zoom out for a second, think about the historical context, because the 928S wasn't just about pushing technology. It was also about navigating a world that was changing fast.
The 70s were a wild time. The fuel crisis had rocked the car industry, and suddenly everyone was worried about fuel efficiency. You'd think a powerful V8 sports car like the 928S would have been totally out of step with the times.
It would have been easy to think that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But remember, Porsche had designed the M28 with efficiency in mind. It was surprisingly fuel efficient for its size and power, especially with the electronic fuel injection. It wasn't about sacrificing performance, it was about finding a balance.
It was a sign of things to come. Today, we expect good fuel economy from performance cars, but back then, it was a revolutionary idea.
Absolutely. And Porsche was already experimenting with other technologies like cylinders deactivation and even early versions of double-clutch transmissions as ways to improve fuel economy even further. They were constantly innovating, pushing the limits, even when the world was throwing curveballs.
It's amazing how the 928S reflects both the worries and the dreams of its era. But let's not forget what this car was really all about: performance. Let's talk numbers.
Ah, yes, the numbers. Even in its early form, the 928S could go from 0 to 60 mph in just under 7 seconds and could hit a top speed of over 140 mph. That's seriously quick, even by today's standards.
And with that 5.0-liter engine, those numbers got even better. We're talking about a car that could compete with the best sport cars of its day while still offering the comfort and refinement of a Grand Tourer.
It was a wolf in sheep's clothing. But numbers only tell part of the story. What really matters is the experience, the feeling of being behind the wheel of a 928S.
Okay, let's paint a picture for our listeners. Imagine yourself settling into those sculpted seats, gripping that thick, leather-wrapped steering wheel.
You hear that V8 rumble to life, a deep guttural growl that sends chills down your spine. It's a sound that says this car is ready for anything.
You put the gear lever into first, gently ease off the clutch and feel that surge of power as the 928S takes off. It's not a violent jolt, it's a wave of smooth, effortless acceleration, like a tidal wave building momentum.
And as you go through the gears, that V8 just keeps pulling, the sound turning into a symphony of pure mechanical power. The steering is precise, perfectly weighted, giving you that sense of connection to the road that's so crucial in a sports car.
And through the corners, the 928S is a revelation. There's no drama, no instability, just pure grip and balance. You can feel the Weissach axle working its magic, keeping the rear end planted, letting you carry speed through corners with total confidence. It's a car that rewards a smooth, flowing driving style.
It's not about brute force. It's about finesse. It's about working with the car, not fighting it. And even with all that performance, the 928S is also incredibly comfortable. Those seats hug you, the cabin is spacious and airy, and there's a feeling of solidity and refinement that's everywhere.
It's a car you could drive for hours and never get tired. It's a true Grand Tourer, a car that embodies that perfect balance of performance and luxury. It's the kind of car that makes you want to just keep driving to see where the road takes you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of the 928S. It's a car that goes beyond its parts, its specs, its history. It's a car that speaks to your soul, that ignites a passion for driving, for experiencing the open road in a way that few other cars can.
We've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From its origins to its tech innovations, from its controversial looks to its thrilling performance. The 928S is a car that defies easy categorization.
It's a car that deserves to be celebrated, to be appreciated for its uniqueness, its boldness, its unwavering commitment to pushing the limits of what a car can be.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners who might be thinking about adding a 928S to their garage?
Well, first things first, do your research. The 928S is a complex machine, and there's a lot to consider when choosing the right one model year engine, spec, maintenance history. It all matters.
And be ready for the challenges of owning a classic car. Parts can be pricey, finding a good mechanic can be tough, and you need to be willing to put in the time and money to keep it running smoothly.
But the rewards, the joy of owning and driving a true automotive iconoclast are priceless. It's a car that will turn heads, spark conversations, and put a smile on your face every time you get behind the wheel.
It's a car that will make you feel like you're part of something special, something that goes beyond the ordinary. So if you're looking for a car that's more than just transport a car that's an experience, an adventure, then the 928S might just be the perfect car for you. But we're not done with our deep dive just yet. We've talked about the past, but what about the future? What does the legacy of the 928S mean for Porsche and for the car world as a whole? Stay tuned because we're about to explore those questions and leave you with some final thoughts to ponder. So we've been through the 928S's past, its bold design, its engineering triumphs, even its, love it or hate it styling. It really makes you think,
It does. The 928S, it really challenged the norms, both back then and even now when we look back on it. It wasn't afraid to be different, to go its own way.
And that's what makes it so relevant today. It reminds us that progress doesn't always mean following the crowd. Sometimes it's about having the guts to break the mold.
Exactly. And the 928S's legacy, it goes way beyond just being a cool classic car. It had a huge impact on Porsche as a company.
Yeah, how did one car, even one as successful as this one, change Porsche's whole direction? I mean, they were already famous for the 911.
The 911 is an icon, for sure. But the 928S, it made Porsche embrace new technologies, to think beyond that air-cooled rear-engine formula they'd been using for so long. It expanded their engineering horizons, and that experimentation led to innovations that eventually made their way into other models.
So the 928S was like a testing ground for new ideas.
You could say that. It allowed them to explore things like front-engine water-cooled layouts, advanced aerodynamics, even electronic systems that were cutting edge back then. These advancements didn't just stay with the 928. They influenced the development of the whole Porsche lineup.
That's pretty amazing to think about, that this car that's often seen as a bit of an oddball in Porsche's history actually played such a big role in shaping the company's future. It shows that sometimes the unexpected creations can have the biggest impact.
Absolutely. And the 928S's influence, it goes beyond Porsche. It pushed the whole car industry forward. It showed that performance and luxury could go hand in hand, that a Grand Tour could be both comfortable and a thrill to drive.
It challenged the status quo, and
Yeah.
in doing so, it raised the bar for what a sports car could be.
And that's a legacy worth remembering. But as we wrap up our deep dive, let's bring it back to you, the listener. Why should you care about the 928S in 2024?
Yeah, this isn't just ancient history. This is a car that's still relevant today, whether you're a seasoned collector or just starting to explore the world of classic cars.
For one thing, the 928S is just a fantastic car to drive. It offers this unique blend of performance, handling, and comfort that's hard to find in modern cars. It's a car that connects you to the road, that engages your senses, that makes you feel alive.
It's also a car that's going up in value. Well-maintained 928Ss are becoming more and more desirable, and their prices are steadily rising. It's not just a car, it's an investment.
But it's more than that. The 928S is a statement. It tells the world that you appreciate something different, something unique, something that breaks the rules. It's a car that stands out from the crowd, and that's a powerful thing.
It's a conversation starter, a head-turner, a car that will make people do a double take. But before you run out and buy a 928S, there are a few things to consider.
Do your research. Learn about the different model years, the common problems, the maintenance costs. Find a good mechanic who really knows these cars.
And be ready to put in some time and money. Owning a classic car, it's not always easy. It takes patience, dedication, and a willingness to learn.
But if you're willing to put in the effort, the rewards are huge. Owning a 928S, it's not just about driving a car. It's about experiencing a piece of automotive history, about connecting with a legacy of innovation and passion.
It's about being part of a community of enthusiasts who get it, who share your appreciation for something truly special. So if you're looking for a car that's more than just a way to get around, a car that's an adventure, a statement, a work of art, then the 928S might just be the car for you.
It's a car that will challenge your perceptions, that will make you rethink what a sports car can be, that will leave you wanting more.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive, but the exploration doesn't have to end here. We encourage you to learn more about the 928S, to read about it, watch videos, maybe even find one in person, and experience its magic firsthand.
And as you do, we'll leave you with this one last thought. The 928S was a car that dared to be different. It challenged conventions, it pushed boundaries, and in doing so, it left a mark on the car world. What will your legacy be? What will you create? What will you achieve that will defy expectations and make a lasting impact?
That's something to think about, isn't it? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another adventure into the world of knowledge and discovery.